Today's guest is Matt Paneitz. He's the executive director at Long Way Home. All right, Matt, thank you for coming on the show.
Great to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn about this nonprofit you started, over 21 years ago, Long Way Home, involved in a lot of um, construction in and around volunteers and reusing waste. And I mean, starting a business is one thing, but starting a nonprofit is a whole separate thing. So I'm interested to hear your journey.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll take it from the top. Uh, I
Sure.
was a Peace Corps volunteer in Guatemala in 2002 and 2003, and that's what introduced me to Guatemala. I hadn't traveled much in the world before that. I think I'd been to Europe for a week before that. And then, yeah, Guatemala pretty well changed my life. I saw a side of the world that I was unaware that was in existence, and that was that a lot of our neighboring countries to the United States were there were a lot of people living in poverty. And after doing my service, I wanted to do something about it and decided that I would spend the rest of my life doing something about it. And that's how Long Way Home was born.
Yeah, for sure. Now, what did the early days look like? How did you get it going?
Well, kind of comical, right? Because I had no idea what I was doing. I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. I had, other than Peace Corps, I'd never really even considered the concept of volunteering. Didn't really have a much, highly philanthropic family. We didn't spend summers volunteering somewhere. Like what basically, started off was I had a passion for something, needed to raise a little bit of money to be able to do something with that passion. Went to the library, filled out the application for the 501c3 on paper, right? And then I cold called lawyers and accountants to help me do the actual filing and the paperwork and got kind of lucky. Found two people who were super helpful. Then I sold all of my belongings, including my 1973 Caprice Classic convertible. I raffled that so we'd have some early funding and bought a $500 Volkswagen Jetta where I don't think the windows worked. Maybe the sunroof didn't work or something. That was a long time ago. And then picked up a couple of my friends along the way, one in Dallas and one in Austin, because I started the drive from Oregon and drove all the way to Guatemala. And went back to where I was a Peace Corps volunteer. And yeah, then decided I would continue that work. And I lived there straight through until 2017. And now I've been back and forth.
Yeah. So, you know, get in the car, grab some friends and go is a good business plan too, in some cases.
Yeah, no, there was no business plan. There was no strategic plan. I don't think I'd ever heard of those. The first time I'd ever heard of a board of directors, because I was a paramedic before that and I was in construction. Like, those were not things that came across my life. And so, when I chose my board of directors, I called five of my friends and said, hey, will you be on the board? None of them had much experience being on boards, but said, sure, I'll support you however I can. And yeah, then, had no website, had no fundraising really. I asked my friends to donate money here and there. No Facebook page, no business plan, nothing to speak of. Started off literally completely from zero.
Yeah. So what were some early things you did that worked?
Well, I believed in what I was doing. So that's really useful whenever you start telling the story to people, like I'm in a non-touristic town. It's called San Juan Comalapa in the Western Highlands of Guatemala. And there's a couple of touristic towns nearby, an hour and a half away is the town called Antigua. And whenever I would go to Antigua to hang out and I'd be sitting at a restaurant, spark up a conversation and I would tell the person next to me that if they want to spend a little time off the tourist path and go to a non-tourist town, that they could come and hang out in Comalapa and volunteer. And then I started charging those people. At first, it was $50 for a month, right? Now we charge $85 for a week. But yeah, we built up that volunteer program.
So
And
you're getting people to pay to volunteer.
that's right. That was not a concept that I was familiar with, but I knew that they were paying money for hostels and that at least the lodging would make it worth it. And then we really like to work, so you throw a couple of 8 or 9 hour days on top of that. We sat around the campfire a lot, and things were simple at the very beginning.
Yeah, yeah. And it is that something that scaled? Like, this kind of experiential sort of, can you call it tourism?
I think people call it voluntourism. Yeah, there's
Okay.
a few terms out there. And yeah, it has scaled quite a bit because those same volunteers are now who we depend on because they become our donors, they become our staff, they become our board of directors. They're people who have a passion for what they experienced during the time that they were with us and start to care. And they form the core of the organization at a certain point. And then they tell their friends. And, by now we've had thousands of volunteers and who've had, you know, who've brought unlimited ideas to the table and made enormous contributions throughout our organization.
Yeah. And at what point did the sort of using sort of materials and waste, like used tires, into to sort of green building stuff come about?
Well, we started the organization out and we started in a different way than we are now, right? Our original mission
Yeah.
was revolved around doing youth recreation. And so
Oh,
we built a city park. And then while we were building the city park, living in a fairly impoverished area, we saw kids carrying water and firewood instead of going to school, kind of doing the very basics to survive, and thought that, okay, the park is about done. And now we would like to expand into something, that's a higher priority, like helping people have a better ability to live. And so we decided to build a school because if we were going to do it, well, let's do it in a structured, systematic approach. And we were initially going to build a vocational school so we could teach the welding and the electrical and the masonry associated with the infrastructure that we wanted to work on. And then that turned into an actual pre-K through high school, like a normal school. And then now we've been integrating all of these concepts into the actual curriculum at the school. And our students are now, they are helping us to implement the infrastructure. And going back a little bit, whenever we decided to build the school, we decided to build that school out of rubbish, right? Because there's rubbish all over the ground. And so those two things work together because a lot of the students who are now involved, they're building their projects out of rubbish.
yeah, for sure. I mean, it just goes to show you, like, many times people will say, well, I can't do this, I can't do that, I don't have the resources. But I mean, I guess constraints can lead to some great innovations.
That's really what happened is because we didn't have a lot of support starting off. We didn't have that huge donor that was like, we'll pay for everything. And, we were really having to figure things out as we went. And we wanted to build infrastructure for families. We saw trash on the ground. We were like, we can reduce the amount of traditional materials like cement and gravel and rebar potentially in order to make our projects less expensive and more available to families. And so that brought innovation about. It's the fact that we did not have enough to go around.
Yeah. And since you've started, what sort of uh, scale, or what have you been able to build since you've started?
Yeah, we've done a whole bunch of structures using tires. And that concept is basically you take a used tire, you lay it flat, you put a bunch of dirt in it, You take a sledgehammer, you beat the dirt into the side of the tire with a sledgehammer, you fill it out, and then it becomes a brick of sorts. Now, given a
Mm.
very wide one, about 2.5 feet thick, as far as the walls are really thick. But then, like cinder block or red brick, you stagger them, right? And then you either go in a circle. Most of the time, we build in, without 90-degree angles because there's a lot of earthquakes in the area. And architecturally, they say sound is round or round is sound.
Oh, gotcha, gotcha. And what is so we're in the roofing business. What's the roof look like?
The roof is, we have that's always one of our biggest things, like the walls we have figured out pretty well. You can use tires, Ubuntu blocks, earth, eco bricks. Some people use straw bale. There's a variety of options, but with the roof, we want to be sustainable, but it's really hard to figure out what material is appropriate because you don't want to use lumber because it's already a deforested area. So we end up using a lot of concrete, right? And we do barrel vaults or we do domes because we also like to harvest the water off of the roofs, and that gives you the cleanest water when you are harvesting water. And they also last a really long time. Anything else that you would put up, because sometimes people will be like, well, using concrete isn't very green. And of course, we agree, but then you start asking, what are your other options? If you use corrugated metal, it doesn't last that long, and that is still, it takes a lot of energy to produce corrugated metal. Then if you want to use if you want to use lumber, it takes a lot of energy, and then you're deforesting. So we've considered that concrete can be considered green if done appropriately. And then, whenever you shape them in the form of a barrel vault or an arch, it also can provide some strength for the building itself.
Okay, very cool. And with these crews and volunteers, how are they organized? Because I'm assuming these volunteers all come and go and have all sorts of different things. How do you manage that whole process?
Yeah, we have service groups that come as a group. There'll be 10 or 15 people, and they'll say, instead of going to Daytona Beach for spring break or some other popular location, they go, we want to work. We want to make a contribution to society during our break. So, can we bring 15 people, work on a project? And yeah, we charge $600. That includes food, lodging, and transportation from the airport, which is pretty reasonably priced compared to a lot of the other options out there. And then another option is individual volunteers. They will come, and sometimes they stay for a week, and sometimes they stay for 6 years, right? Because some
Okay.
people get there and they love it, and they love the culture, and they love the community, they love what we're doing, and they want to see it through. And then a lot of them will go off and start their own things.
Yeah. And is it easy to stay?
No, it is absolutely not easy to stay because it is an impoverished town.
Yeah.
That means that, they roll up the carpets in town at night. There's nothing to do there at night. Recently, they've actually added a whole lot of restaurants. I was shocked the last time I was there to see such diversity in the food options that were not there for a really long time. But yeah, there's not much to do in the evening, so you better want to read a whole lot. And, in the early days, we didn't have very good internet, so there wasn't much streaming going on. Now our internet service is better, and so you can watch a lot more movies. But yeah, there's not much to do at night. And, if you're there for the work and you're focused on the work and you're focused on embracing the community and the culture and hanging out with the locals, then it is easy to stay for a long time, as long as 20-ish years.
Yeah. How do you get the word out? Are there, reps or agents or whatnot, or is it just people just, running into it in podcasts and online or word of mouth? How does that work?
A lot of people are Googling opportunities, right? So whenever you set up a website and you optimize the website, put up some keywords, there are a lot of people because we ask, how did you find us? And people will say, I Googled volunteering Central America, volunteering Guatemala. Plus, there's a bunch of volunteering platforms that you can get into or that you can put a profile on. And a lot of people will use the platforms because the platforms vet the organizations to make sure that, wherever these volunteers are going, are legitimate. And then a lot of it's word of mouth, right? If somebody comes, volunteers with us, has a good experience, then they're at a hostel in Honduras, continuing their travels. Then they talk well about us. And then the next person says, okay, cool, I want to do something like that. I want to try sustainable living techniques. Because at our campus, we harvest water, we use thermal mass to heat the buildings. That's our exchange. We charge individual volunteers at $85 for a week, and because they're paying us basically to learn to do, to apply sustainable living techniques, because that's what our campus is built on. That's what we teach at our school, and that's the exchange that we're looking for. Then, of course, we use the money that they pay us to pay our teachers at our school.
Yeah. And speaking of school, I know you've done a lot of different school. Tell me about that.
Yeah, yeah. So whenever we were building the campus and we invited our first students, we saw that the education that we were providing at our school was kind of boring. The teachers were standing in front of class telling the kids fairly boring information. It wasn't a very dynamic approach to education, considering we built the classroom out of sustainable materials. We wanted something better. And so we thought maybe we could try Montessori or, cut and paste, some type of education model that was pre-existing. And we didn't really find anything that was usable in our context. So what I did was went to get a degree in philosophy of education so I could more systematically approach how to come up with an education model that made sense for our school and our town in our context. And that's where we came up with the Hero School education model. Because I basically took best practices from a whole bunch of educational philosophers over the years and came up with a model. And that's why we are called Hero School, because our model is to fight poverty. And now I'm doing a doctorate in education because I'm still on that path to improve the education model.
Sure. Tell me some of the main components of this model that you've sort of taken from various best practices.
Well, really, the idea is that, we want to accomplish two things at once. We want to provide a quality education that is not available to a lot of rural communities, and we want to fight poverty and relieve suffering for people that are living in extreme poverty, right? And so, take, for example, our seventh graders. What we found out was that a lot of the people in our town are cooking over open flames indoors, and it's the number one reason that people go to the health clinic is for upper respiratory infection. So several of the philosophers that I read about said, hey, you should use the community as your laboratory, as your classroom, and solve societal problems while with your students. And so we decided to focus the seventh grade on solving that societal problem. And so now the seventh graders, they use math class and then they apply math to design a stove. In social studies class, we decide who gets the stove. In theater class, we do theater about having done the stove. In music class, we write songs about the stove. It's kind of Roman in a sense where, we're acting out and creating plays, working on these concepts relating to solving this societal issue. And so
Yeah.
now, every year, our students go into the community and they build a stove. We built 6 stoves for families that would otherwise be cooking over open flames indoors. So in the
That's
eighth
very
grade, we
cool.
do water tanks. In the ninth grade, compost latrines. We do retaining walls. We do classrooms. We try to integrate all this back into the classroom. So there's a nice combination of theory and practice.
Yeah. I mean, you're trying to solve a problem that's in your community. I mean, I think that would sort of be very, I don't know, great because you get a result, right? Because sometimes school can be all theory and no result, and you're teaching something and then reinforcing it in many different ways, and then going out and doing a quote unquote co-op or getting the job done sounds like a fun way of doing it.
And the students love it. right? Because whenever I was in school and we go on a field trip, that may have been my favorite thing about going to elementary or middle or high school were the field trips. But now our students are, going into their community and doing something really beneficial. And from what I can tell, it's their favorite part of going to our school is going out, building a stove, because it's, 3-4 days in a community member's house, cutting bricks and wood and using masonry and bending rebar, like they get to apply what they've seen other people in the neighborhood doing as well, because there's a lot of other builders and projects going on, and they're curious about them, and they're going, now I can do that.
Yeah, for sure. Is there anything else about what you're doing that you want to share?
My favorite thing that we're doing, that what is most exciting, is that so we're on the path to writing lesson plans for each of our classes, right, at all grade levels. We're going to share those lesson plans with the other teachers in our school district who don't necessarily have a lot of access to lesson plans. So our lesson plans will potentially make their lives easier. It'll give them materials to work with, rubrics, and then we're hoping that at a district level throughout our town, we will unite all public schools and we will all fight poverty together. We'll first fight all the poverty we can in San Juan Comalapa in Guatemala, where we're currently located, and then I fully expect that we'll go beyond that.
Yeah, how exciting. All right. Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, it just shows that, you know, not having resources is not an excuse. The most important thing is having the passion to go out and do it, and it always pays to have good friends.
Passion I have in abundance, and now there's a lot of friends of Long Way Home, and we're doing it together, and we'll work with anybody because you never know who has the next great idea, right? People need the opportunity to try things out, to fail even, and then to jump back on and try again. And yeah, we're really into failing because that's been a big part of our growth and learning process. And so if you're interested in failing, you're welcome to join us. But eventually we will turn it into something positive and we will have some success.
Absolutely. You learn each time. If people want to, fail forward with you, how do they get a hold of you or the organization? Where should they go?
Our website is lwhome.org. My email is matt@lwhome.org. We're real easy to find. You can Google Long Way Home Guatemala. You'll see opportunities on our website for how you volunteer, how you bring a service group. And, I'm pretty well working on this all the time. So I'll be back and I can respond within about 15 minutes.
There you go. Well, Matt, thank you for what you do. Thank you for coming on the show, sharing your story. And yeah, we really appreciate you.
I really appreciate this opportunity to share this story. We really need help. And also, people can donate, by the way, although we did talk about the importance of innovation through not having enough. Well, that's fun and everything. But yes, people can also donate. So thank you for this opportunity to share that as well.